it's Karen Burniston here with my monthly designer challenge video. The theme this month is haunted location. So I created a graveyard scene, and then something that has been on my list for a while is to try styling our snowman pop-up like a famous skeleton. These three main dies are what's used to make the majority of the project. So that's the snowman pop-up, the Halloween scene, and Halloween elements. And then for decorations, I've used circles crosshatch, Halloween borders, and small script Halloween. Now, I love pattern paper, but I just couldn't find the right gloomy paper in my stash. So now I'm taking some Distress Oxide inks, I'm pouncing them on a nonstick sheet, and then I'm squirting that with some water until the ink beads up. And then I've cut some pieces of gray cardstock for my card. I'm dredging that through the ink and then heating it with a heat tool until everything is dry. I made 3 of these rectangular panels. They are each 4 3/4 on the width, 5 3/4 on the height. I did the same technique on a piece of gray cardstock 3 inches by 11 inches, and this is what I will use to die cut the graveyard scene. For the moons, I did something similar, this time starting with white cardstock and using only the yellow and brown Distress Oxide inks. And then after die cutting, using the circles crosshatch, I'm just brushing the edges with some brown ink. And apparently this video is just about breaking all my usual rules, because I also did the front of the card before the inside, which I never do with pop-up cards, but I just had an idea that I wanted to try where I used the bones border to cut the edges of that inked panel. And then after I glued it on, I could just line those borders up with the edge, but then leave just a little bit of black showing in between. And then I finished out the front of the card with 3 bats cut from mirror card. Those are from the Halloween scene die set. And then Trick or Treat is from the small script Halloween. I'm making a 5 by 6 side fold card. So I started with a piece of black cardstock, 10 inches wide by 6 inches tall, scored in the middle for folding. And then now I'm going to put those panels of inked cardstock inside the card. Then I'm going to switch to that 3 by 11 strip of inked cardstock, and I'm going to use the Halloween scene graveyard edger twice on that strip. I'm using my Spellbinders Platinum 6, but you can certainly use any die cutting machine that can accommodate a wafer thin die. So that is an edger die, which means it only cuts the edge, and that way I can just move that down, line up the end, and then cut it a second time. And then to really amp up the creepiness, I'm using some black ink and a blending tool and going around all the edges. And then I just need to fold that piece in half. Switching now to the snowman pop-up, I've cut 2 of the bases and I'm working all of the folds as mountain folds, meaning I'm folding away from myself. And then I'll use some adhesive in the tapered tab to join the 2 sides together. So that's just the normal assembly of a base for the pop-up snowman. Now to use these behind the graveyard, I don't want the tabs to separate. I want them to stay next to each other. So what I'm going to do is just tape them together using just some regular Scotch tape. So where they would normally meet in the fold, I've just gone in there with a little piece of tape to hold them together. And then I'm going to repeat that exact same process with the other base. Now you could really put that graveyard anywhere. I've decided on 1 1/8 inches from the top of the card. So I've given myself a little pencil line. That's where the fold of my graveyard is going to go. And then what's going to hold it to the card is going to be these snowman bases. So I'm going to add my glue all over one of the base tabs. And then where that's going to go is at the base of the graveyard scene. It really can go anywhere. I've just chosen a spot kind of in one of the tallest parts of the graveyard scene. And then I want to line that up with the base. Okay, so the tab is glued to the back of the graveyard scene so that the end of it is at the flat end of the graveyard scene. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So these do not have to be in the same location along the graveyard. You know, it doesn't really matter as far as that goes. They just have to be somewhere on either side of the graveyard scene such that the base is lined up with the bottom edge of the graveyard. Okay, so folding that in half again, I want to put the fold right on my pencil line, and then I can rotate that to whatever angle I need to keep the tombstones in the card. So I'm looking out there to that far left tombstone and keeping it in the card. And I want to make sure that the fold of my graveyard is right on my pencil line. So that bottom edge right there is right on the pencil line. So that needs to be right over the fold of the card. And then once I have a location that I like, I'm going to hold that in place and make sure it doesn't move while I add my adhesive all over the other tab of the snowman base. Okay, so now I'm just going to keep everything flat. I'm going to close the card. It's going to pick up the graveyard scene in exactly the right position to stay hidden when the card is closed. Give that a second to set up. And now I've attached the right side to the card. And then now I'm going to find the flat position again. Then I add my adhesive to the tab for the other half of the graveyard scene. Keep everything nice and flat. Close the card. It will pick up that other base in exactly the right position. And then as it opens, it will lift up the graveyard scene. Now for this effect with the snowman base, the graveyard's not going to pop up to vertical. In other words, it's going to be leaning back a little bit, which is actually the look that I was kind of going for with this skeleton card. By using that snowman base to pop up the graveyard, then now if I get the base of a snowman cut from my black cardstock and I trim it out to where I can preserve the tabs. So I'm just kind of trimming it into a tabbed base that I can use with one of those spooky trees out of the Halloween scene. And I am going to take a little bit off the bottom of the tree because it'll keep me from trimming quite as many branches up at the top that stick out of the card. Then I'm just going to attach that tree to that base. Now I'm able to just hook those tabs into that snowman base back behind the graveyard scene. So I can basically just choose any two holes. They can either be across from each other or they can be on the diagonal. It will work whichever way, and you might explore putting the tree in on the diagonal or straight across, maybe one in the front, one in the back. Just really play with it to see how you like it the best. But then it is going to stick out of the card a little bit. So now in the closed position, I'm going to go in and prune my tree branches back until they stay hidden in the card. Another thing would be just to leave them and just use a larger envelope because it's kind of cool to have spooky branches sticking out of the card in the closed position. Okay, now I'm going to add the moon. So I definitely have to look at where this is going to land in the card in the closed position. So I'm going to start by just placing it so that it stays in the card. So I'm going to get real close to the edges, but I'm going to keep it in the card. And then what I want to do is just add some adhesive to the back of the snowman base, because as the card closes, it will pick up that moon in exactly the right position to give it a little bit of lift when the card opens, but then still stay hidden when the card closes. So it's pretty cool because I've got basically 3 layers of pop-up now. So the moon in the back, and then the tree in the middle, and then the graveyard in the front. Then I repeat that process to make another tree with tabs at the bottom, and then I attach that to the snowman base on the right side of the card, and then do whatever pruning I need to do to keep that in the card. There are 2 black birds in the Halloween Elements set, so I've perched one on either side of the graveyard scene, and then I've added the spider web and spider from the Halloween scene to the right tree. Okay, so now let's talk about making the pop-up skeleton. Okay, starting with the face pieces, which I've die cut out of white. Now normally you would put the tab through from underneath, and then it would be sticking out a little bit, and then you would add a carrot nose to it. But we're doing a skeleton, so I'm going to put the tab through from the top. So now the tab is hidden behind the piece, and then I just want to fold the set, mount and fold, and then just kind of rotate everything and kind of squish it until the slots line up so that the slots are in the same position on both sides. And then I unfold it. So it doesn't need any adhesive. I just wanted to get that fold in it, and I basically have the tab hidden behind the piece. I'm going to use a pencil now to sketch on the eyes. So I just want big, round eyes on both sides. Now, if you wanted to make your skeleton angry, you could adjust the shape of those eyes. Then I'm going to sketch a couple of nostrils and a big wide smile that will stay below the slots on the snowman. Then I just have to trace over my lines with a black pen, fill in the eyes, and add some stitch lines. I've cut the big snowman parts out of black cardstock, and now I'm just using a white gel pen to add some vertical stripes along the bottom half of the snowman. And I can stop when I get to the notches because I'm going to end up trimming the outer portion off. Then I'm going to repeat that with the other large black snowman part. And again, I don't need to go any further out than the notches. Okay, now I need to trim these pieces. So I'm going to take the one that's solid, that doesn't have a slot up the middle, and I'm going to cut through the head and down into the striped area a little bit, and then trim it off into a V. So now I've kind of created the V neck for his suit. And then I'm going to take off all of the area past the notch. So I'm just going to trim on the edge of the notch and get rid of it. Okay, so there's the front of the suit. And then I can use that one as a template, essentially, to get the same V cut in the slotted snowman part. So just holding that in place and cutting on that same line, and then I'll have a matching V. And then again, with the one that has the slot, I don't need the area past the notches, so I can just take my scissors and trim that off. Now these suit pieces can be glued to the large snowman parts that were cut out of white cardstock. And again, I won't need the area past the notch. So now I'm ready to put these two big snowman pieces together, but I have to pay attention to where the notches are because those need to be forward to hold the face on. So I'm going to take the solid snowman half from the back and get the notch seated in the slot at the bottom. And then I just have to wiggle the slot over the top of the notch. And what's important is that as I look at it from the front, that I have those notches on the head that can hold the face on. I can make Jack's kind of distinctive bat bow tie using two of the bats out of the Halloween scene. So I'll start with a gel pen to add the eyes. And then what I want to do is I want to basically change the wings so that instead of kind of more solid pieces, I'm taking wedges out so that they're sort of spiky. And I'm going to make a spiky side to that wing on one of them for the left side and then the other one for the right side. So I only have to kind of spike the wing, so to speak, on one side of each of those bats. So again, I'm just taking some wedges out until I have kind of that spiky wing. And then for this one that's going to be the right side, I'm just going to cut it straight up the middle. And I'm going to keep the side that has the spikies, and I'm going to kind of bend those wing parts down. And then that's just going to glue there to the right side of the snowman so that the center of the bat, the edge of the bat, I guess, so to speak, is just right on the edge of the slot. Okay. And then I can go in there behind there and add a little bit more glue to make sure that it stays in place, especially because I kind of bent the wing down. So I want to have it continue to kind of spike straight out. All right, so then the other one, I'm going to leave more of the head attached. So I'm just going to take off the right wing on this one. And that is because I'm able to actually slide this one a little further past center because that's the solid snowman. So all I have to do is just slide it in there and get it in a location until the bat is kind of completed. So see, it goes past the slot. And that way I don't have a white stripe in the middle because I filled it in with a little bit of extra bat. All right, one cool bat bow tie, and now it's time to add the face to the head. So you get the slot seated in the notch at the bottom, okay? And then you just pull it through until it clicks at the top. So it does give a rather satisfying click when you pull that through. So start with the bottom, get the notch seated, then just pull the headpiece through until it clicks at the top. Now I purposely drew the eyes so that a little bit of them would be missing, and then once I got the face on the head, I can actually draw in the rest of the eye up on those head parts that come through the face. So just completing that out now. I've cut another base piece and folded all of the folds like mountain folds and used the tapered tab to attach one side to the other. So this is just the typical snowman assembly, but before I install this, I want to add the pinstripes to it. So right now my favorite white gel pen is a retractable jelly roll. So we do sell those on our website. I've had pretty good success with those. White gel pens are kind of problematic in general, but these ones have worked really, really nicely. So that's my new favorite, are the retractable white jelly rolls. And then I'm going to do the same on both sides, is just add the pinstripes. And again, I'm just trying not to think too much about it. I'm just basically drawing those in. They don't have to be perfectly straight or perfectly spaced. That's what makes it look most authentic. Okay, usual snowman assembly, which is that you just get the tabs in the base through those holes. So you go from the outside. So the outside, you just wiggle those tabs through the holes in the base. So I'm just going around and getting those wiggled into the holes. Okay, and then now that's ready to install inside the card. Okay, so I need to find the flat position, which is just when the tabs stick out of the bottom and then the snowman is collapsed flat. And then I'm just going to add my adhesive all over one of those base tabs. And then that is going to butt up to the fold of the card. Now it's going to be a little fiddly because I have a graveyard in the way. So I'm going to lift up the left side of the card so that the right graveyard kind of flattens down a little bit, making it easier for me to get that base tab in there and attached to the card. So I'm a little bit ahead of the graveyard, not too far ahead because I want to put really long legs on Jack. Now I add my adhesive all over the other base tab, keeping everything flat. Then I need to close the card and pick it up. So typical assembly on that now. Okay, and then when I open it, the top half of Jack is now going to pop up. Now, one thing I'm noticing is that Jack's face is collapsing inward, and I think it will look better if it collapses outward, but that is really just your choice because it works either way. But I'm going to reach in there and make sure that there's a mountain fold in the middle of the face so that it is collapsing outward, and then I think that gives it a more rounded look. For arms and legs, I have a piece of black cardstock that is 4 inches tall, and I'm just going in and adding my pinstripes to it. And I just need to go out far enough to where I can get a strip for the arms and a couple strips for the legs. So on the arms, I like a width of 1/4 of an inch plus a smidge. So I would go 1/16 past 1/4 of an inch. And then that one can be cut in half at 2 inches, and that will do both arms. Okay, so those are 2 inches long. They're about 1/4 of an inch plus a smidge. And then for the legs, a little bit wider. So I'm doing 3/8 of an inch on the width of the legs. And I'm going to leave those the full 4 inches. The snowman set includes boots, so that's perfect for the base of the legs. So I'm just going to add some glue to the boots and add a leg to it. Now the boot ends up being just a little bit wider than the leg, so I'm just going to kind of shave off that side section that's wider than the leg. And then I just do that for the other one as well. Okay, to add some knees, a bend to the legs, I'm just going to take a wedge out of the leg about halfway up, and then I'm just going to bend that into a knee and then add some adhesive to hold the leg together. Okay, so I'm going to do that on both legs. So all I do is just kind of figure out about where halfway is, about 2 inches up the leg. From the back, I'm going to cut a triangular shaped wedge out of the leg. Then I'm going to bend it, use a little bit of glue, and attach it at that bent angle. So you can definitely explore different positions for the legs. I decided to have his left, my right leg, just attached to the pop-up so that it was kind of popping up itself, and I just have to check and make sure it stays in the card. So I could trim a little bit off the top of the leg if I need to make it shorter. And then rather than have the other one do the same thing, which I could have had it do the same thing, I just decided I wanted a little bit of a different pose. So for this other leg, I'm going to put it flat on the card, and wherever it crosses the fold, I would like that to be just kind of a single location. So I wouldn't want it to cross the fold twice. So I've got to just kind of figure out where it's going to cross the fold. And then I'm going to go ahead and just sort of pre-fold the leg in that location and then go back and forth a few times so it gets really loose. and that way it'll cross the fold pretty nicely. So I'm going to start by just adding some glue under the boot, and that way I can make sure the fold is right where I want it over the fold of the card, and then I'll just put some glue somewhere else. I've tucked the other end up underneath the pop-up so I could go underneath there with some glue if I need to, but I can just kind of check it and see if I feel like if it's secure enough. Okay, so Jack still needs some arms and hands. So out of the Halloween Elements set, there is a pair of creepy hands that is actually connected at the bottom, and that is so you can make it as an easel stop, but when you want to use them as individual hands, you just have to die cut them out of whatever color and then just snip them at the fold line. If I take my scissors and elongate the fingers, then they're going to look more like skeleton hands. So I do that by just taking a wedge out in between each set of fingers. So just taking my scissors along kind of the contour of one finger and then wedging it out between that and the next finger. And what's nice is bones are kind of knobbly anyway, so it really doesn't have to be perfect. It's kind of better if it isn't. And now I'm going to take a black pen and just draw in some joints. So the thumb's going to get one joint at the bend, and then at the base where the wedges are, I'll go across all the fingers in that location. And then each of the individual fingers will get two black lines to simulate the joints. Okay, so here's my finished skeleton hand, and all I need to do now is just glue that behind one of the sleeves. And now I need to just repeat that process for the other hand and sleeve. The exact same thing that I did to create knees on the legs are going to be used to create elbows on the arms. So just kind of about halfway through the sleeve, I want to take a wedge out on the thumb side of the sleeve. Okay, so just looking at the hand and making sure that I'm wedging it on the thumb side. And then I just take the wedge out, bend it, glue it back together again, and then that'll give a little bend to the arms. And then I just repeat that again for the other arm. So about halfway down the arm, I take a triangular wedge out on the thumb side of the arm and then add a little glue and glue it back together again in that bent position. So you can definitely choose where the arms are going to go on the pop-up depending on what kind of pose that you'd like your skeleton to have. I've decided to put one of the arms a little further down, and then the other one is going to eventually hold a jack-o'-lantern. So that one's going to be kind of more in a waving position, so up in the air. And I've just attached that to the main part of the body behind there. And this one I decided I kind of wanted that to be at a little bit further out angle to give me room for that jack-o'-lantern. And just check that everything stays in the card, which it does. So one thing I was noticing about my Jack is that he almost looks a little bit too clean, you know, up on his head and everything. And I wish I would have actually done a little inking on the edges. But what's nice about this pop-up is I can take that face off and then hit those edges with a little bit of ink to kind of give them more of a dingy, you know, spooky look for Halloween. And then I can put them right back on again. So that is a nice thing about that Snowman pop-up is that you do have the opportunity to take the face off. That would be the same if you decided to change his expression. Maybe you get it all put together and you're like, oh, I'd rather have him have angry eyes. You know, you could just take that one off, recut those white pieces, and draw a new face on. Okay, definitely glad that I took the time to do that because I do think that having those inked edges matches more of the kind of grungy, inky look of the card. I'm going to add some adhesive to some of the fingers and then kind of weave the jack-o'-lantern so that some of the fingers are in front and some are behind. So that jack-o'-lantern came out of that same Halloween Elements set, and I just have to make sure that I put it in a location where it will stay in the card. Then I used all of the scraps of my inked cardstock to cut greetings. So I cut the boo out of the Halloween Elements, out of that and black cardstock. And then I did 3 sets of Happy Halloween. Well, actually, one of them's just happy. So Happy Halloween, Happy Halloween, Happy across the bottom here. So that's really subtle, kind of tone on tone, but I liked the way that looked. And then I liked the bones on the outside of the card and kind of wished that I had done the same on the inside, but there's not really room to do the bones in their zigzag pattern. But if I just bend them into more of a straight border, and then I can use a black pen to kind of draw in the joints between the bones, much like I did with the skeleton's hands, then I'll have more of straight borders that I will be able to use around the perimeter of the inside of the card. All right, here's my finished card. All I had to do was finish out those bone borders on the inside of the card. It measures 5 inches by 6 inches, so I can use an A7 envelope for mailing. With Designer Challenge videos, there is an associated blog post, and that is always linked in the description box below. If you go to that blog post, you will find pictures of my cards, supply links, as well as links to all of the wonderful haunted location inspiration by our very talented design team. Thanks for watching. If you click on the website link, you'll go to KarenBurniston.com, where you can purchase these dies as well as find links to our other social media accounts. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel and check out some of my other videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.